My name is Clara, I'm 34 years old, and yesterday I returned from the loneliest journey of my life. I buried my husband in a country neither of us had ever called home. Even now, as I sit here with swollen eyes and trembling hands, I still can't believe those words are mine to speak. My husband gone. The man who was my anchor, my joy, my partner in everything, lowered into the ground half a world away from where our story began. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments. From where are you watching this video? People like to say that tragedy reveals who really loves you, who will stand by you when the storms hit. I used to believe that too. I thought I had a family, imperfect but reliable, people who would rally around me when the unimaginable happened. Instead, what I discovered was that I had spent a lifetime pouring myself into a well that had always been dry. Before I take you into the dark days, I need to tell you about the light that came before them. I met Evan when I was 21 and working my first real job at a bookstore downtown. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was a software developer who had ducked inside during a sudden downpour. I was arranging a display of new releases when he shook the rain from his hair and asked if I could recommend something that wasn't too depressing but still smart. I pointed him toward a novel I had just finished myself, and he smiled in a way that made my stomach do a somersault. He came back the next week to tell me he loved the book. Then the week after that to ask if I had more suggestions. By the third visit, I realized he wasn't just looking for books. He was looking for me. Evan was gentle in ways I hadn't known men could be. He listened. He laughed at my terrible jokes. He remembered the smallest details, like the way I preferred cinnamon in my coffee or the fact that thunderstorms both terrified and calmed me. Within months, we were inseparable. By the time I graduated from college, we were already dreaming about a future together. Our wedding was small but beautiful, held in a rose garden just outside the city. I can still remember the way he looked at me as I walked down the aisle, like I was the only person in the entire universe. Over the next 10 years, we built a life that was ordinary in all the best ways. Weeknight dinners at the kitchen table, Sunday morning walks to our favorite cafe, quiet evenings curled up with books in hand. We traveled when we could, saved diligently, and filled our home with laughter. I used to tell friends that our love wasn't flashy, it was steady, solid, like a lighthouse standing against every tide, and I truly believed it would carry us into old age. That illusion shattered last winter. Evan was offered a 6-month contract with an international firm in Tokyo. It was a dream opportunity. Great pay, career growth, the kind of experience that could open doors for decades. First I hesitated. 6 months felt like forever to me. But Evan, ever the optimist, said, "It's just a season, Clara. We'll be together again before we know it. Think of the adventures we'll share." I agreed. I arranged to visit him halfway through his contract and threw myself into work while he left for Japan. We video called every morning, sending photos back and forth, making silly faces just to shorten the distance. When I visited him 2 months later, it felt like a second honeymoon. We wandered neon-lit streets, explored temples, and even started talking about starting a family once he was back home. I left Tokyo with my heart full and our plans bright. 2 weeks after I returned, Evan complained about a headache during one of our calls. He brushed it off, said it was just stress, maybe dehydration. I told him to rest, promised we'd chat the next day. That next call never came. Instead, my phone rang in the middle of the night. It was one of his co-workers. Evan had collapsed at the office and been rushed to the hospital. The words felt unreal. I scrambled online, booked the first available flight, and prayed harder than I ever have in my life. By the time I reached Tokyo, 22 hours later, he was in a coma. The doctors told me he had suffered a massive brain hemorrhage. They had operated, but the damage was too severe. I sat by his bedside for 5 days, holding his hand, whispering to him, begging him to come back. But his chest rose and fell only because of machines, and his eyes never opened again. On the 6th day he was gone. I can't describe what it's like to stand in a hospital hallway, thousands of miles from home, and hear a doctor say that the love of your life will never wake up. It was like the ground gave way beneath me. I screamed until my throat burned, but no one there knew my name. No one held me as I broke apart. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of paperwork and exhaustion, navigating hospital forms in a foreign language, meeting with officials who spoke through interpreters, learning that bringing his body home would cost more than our savings could ever cover. My family called, yes, but their voices were quick, distracted. We're praying for you. Make sure you keep receipts. Try to stay strong. Their words felt hollow. What I wanted was someone to say, I'll be there. You don't have to do this alone. But no one came. The funeral was small, attended only by a handful of Evan's colleagues and some acquaintances he had made during his contract. I stood at the grave in a land that was not ours, watching his coffin lowered into foreign soil, my sobs swallowed by a language and culture that weren't mine. My parents said tickets were too expensive on such short notice. My brother texted that he had an important client meeting, and so I buried my husband alone. When the last of the mourners left, I knelt by his grave and promised him I would carry his memory home with me. But as I whispered those words, I felt the first flicker of something dark, something that whispered maybe I didn't have a home anymore, not in the way I once believed. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments. From where are you watching this video? When Evan was gone, I thought the worst had already happened. Losing him felt like the end of the world. But I quickly learned there are ways for grief to sharpen, ways it cuts deeper than death itself. It's not just about the person you lose. It's about who doesn't show up for you afterward. Tokyo blurred into a series of sterile waiting rooms, government offices, and nights that felt endless. I woke each morning to silence, the bed beside me still holding the faint indentation of where Evan had slept during my visit. His clothes hung neatly in the closet of the rented apartment, as if he'd return any minute. The air was heavy with his absence. The hospital gave me a stack of documents I didn't understand. Death certificate applications, insurance claim forms, consular notifications. Each page looked like a puzzle in a language I couldn't piece together. I sat in cafes with my phone translating line after line, crying openly into cups of tea that went cold long before I could drink them. I called home often, sometimes just to hear a voice that felt familiar. The first time my mother answered, I choked out the news that Evan was gone, that I was alone and terrified. She sighed heavily. Oh, Clara, I don't know what to say. But have you looked into whether he had life insurance through work? That might help with expenses. Expenses. I was shaking, holding my phone so tightly I thought the glass might crack. My husband was dead, and she was already asking about money. The next day I tried my brother. Troy, I can't figure out this paperwork. I'm so overwhelmed. Can you help me research what to do? He hesitated. I could hear typing in the background. Clara, I'm in the middle of prepping for a big presentation. Maybe you could hire a local lawyer or translator. I mean, that's what people usually do in these situations, right? Hire someone. As if grief were a business transaction. As if money could replace what I really needed. Someone to say, I'll get on the next flight, you don't have to face this alone. But no one said that. I drained our savings just paying for the hospital bills. The insurance covered some, but not enough. Every swipe of my card felt like another piece of security crumbling. I maxed out one credit card on consular fees alone. Still I stayed. I couldn't leave Evan in a morgue. Couldn't abandon him in death the way my family was abandoning me in life. I arranged a modest burial in Tokyo. It was nothing like the funeral we had once imagined. No hymns he loved, no rows of familiar faces. Just a handful of his colleagues. Kind strangers who stood awkwardly at the graveside while I clutched a bouquet of white lilies, the only flowers I could find that morning. The service was brief, spoken in words I half understood, but I tried to fill in the gaps with my own memories. Our wedding vows. His laughter. The way he'd kiss my forehead when I was upset. After the coffin was lowered, I remained alone in the drizzle until the cemetery workers began to clear away the folding chairs. I knelt in the mud, pressed my palm against the fresh earth and whispered, I'll carry you home with me, Evan. Somehow. Some way. But home already felt like a hollow word. Each day after, I trudged through more bureaucracy. Tokyo City Hall, the Ministry of Health, the Embassy. Each place required new stamps, new signatures, new copies of the same heartbreaking document. Proof that Evan was gone. I carried his death certificate in my bag like a wound that kept reopening. At night, the apartment was unbearably quiet. I slept in his t-shirts just to breathe him in, though the scent faded quickly. I cooked meals and left half of them untouched on the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from my parents. Thinking of you. Hang in there. Once my father added, your mom's worried about the cost of all this. Don't let debt pile up too high. As if grief were a luxury I had chosen. One night, after another exhausting day, I sat on the apartment floor surrounded by forms I couldn't decipher. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my pen. In desperation, I called home again. My mother answered on the third ring. Mom, I whispered, barely holding it together. I can't do this. I've been running between offices for days, and everything is in Japanese, and I don't know how to keep going. She paused for a long moment before replying. Honey, I know this is hard, but you've always been so independent. You'll figure it out. Maybe try one of those translation apps you're always talking about. Translation apps. That was her answer to my husband's death. Something inside me cracked then. I realized I could scream, beg, cry, but nothing would change. My family was not coming to save me. When the last document was stamped and the last fee paid, I packed our things. I placed Evan's belongings carefully in my suitcase. His favorite sweater, the wristwatch I had given him on our 5th anniversary, the journal where he scribbled half-finished poems. They felt unbearably heavy, but leaving them behind was unthinkable. On my final morning in Tokyo, I visited his grave again. The cemetery was quiet, birdsong weaving through the air. I laid fresh flowers and knelt on the damp grass. I'm going home now, I whispered. But not the home we dreamed of. Not with the family I thought I had. Just me. Just your memory. The journey back stretched into 30 sleepless hours. Delays. Missed connections. Turbulence so violent I thought the plane would break apart. Through it all, I clutched my bag like a lifeline, terrified something would happen to the only pieces of Evan I had left. At one point, somewhere over the Pacific, I scrolled back through my family's messages. They were a parade of distance. Any idea when you'll be back? Don't forget receipts. Maybe you should cut the trip short. Not once had anyone said, we'll be there when you land. By the time the wheels touched down in Portland, I had been awake for nearly 2 days. My body was running on fumes, but my heart carried the heavier weight, the dread of facing my family again, knowing deep down that nothing would be different. I texted them anyway, one last fragile hope. Flight landed. Can someone pick me up? The replies came quickly. Troy, we're busy. Try Uber. Mom, why didn't you plan better? Sitting there in the cramped airplane seat, surrounded by strangers eager to reunite with their loved ones, I felt something inside me collapse. I thought grief had already taken everything. But here was the final truth. I had no family to come home to. And as tears burned my eyes, I made a silent vow to Evan and to myself. This would be the last time I expected water from an empty well. Portland International Airport was alive with reunions. Everywhere I looked, people were hugging, laughing, holding welcome signs, children running into the arms of waiting parents. I stood in the middle of it all, clutching 3 suitcases, one of them stuffed with Evan's belongings, while the words from my family's texts burned in my mind. We're busy. Try Uber. Why didn't you plan better? It was like watching the entire world celebrate love and belonging while I carried only loss. I dragged my suitcases toward the rideshare pickup zone. One wheel snagged on a crack in the floor, sending Evan's bag tumbling open. His sweater, his shoes, his tie, they spilled across the cold tile. My knees hit the floor as I scrambled to gather them, tears blurring my vision. People walked around me, some with pitying glances, others ignoring me entirely. A woman in an airport uniform stopped. Her name tag said Gloria. She knelt beside me, gently helping me collect Evan's things. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. It was the first time anyone had asked me that since he died. "My husband, he passed away," I whispered. Her eyes softened. She didn't say be strong or move on. She just stayed with me, helped me repack the suitcase and walked me to the curb. She even waited until my Uber arrived, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze before I climbed into the back seat. That moment of kindness from a stranger meant more than all the empty words from my family combined. The Uber ride home was quiet, except for the driver's small attempts at conversation. He asked if I was visiting family, and I mumbled something vague. How could I explain that I had buried my husband overseas, and my own family couldn't be bothered to pick me up at the airport? I stared out the window, watching the city I had once loved roll past, and felt like a ghost returning to a place that no longer belonged to me. When I unlocked my front door, the house was cold and lifeless. I had asked my mother to turn on the heat before I came back, but the thermostat blinked 48 degrees. The air was stale, the refrigerator empty except for spoiled food, the mail overflowing, promises broken again. I carried Evan's things upstairs, dropped them by the bed, and curled up in a chair, too exhausted to even cry. That night I dreamed of him. Evan stood in the garden, smiling, holding out a hand to me. But when I reached for him, he vanished, leaving only silence. I woke with tears running down my face, the ache of longing sharp enough to steal my breath. The next morning, disaster greeted me. Water poured from a cracked pipe in the kitchen ceiling, flooding the floor. The cold had frozen the pipes, and without heat, the damage was inevitable. I waded through icy water, frantically twisting the shut-off valve, but it was too late. Hardwood buckled, drywall sagged, and the house groaned like it too had lost the will to stand. Shivering, soaked, I called my brother. "Troy," I said, teeth chattering, "the house is flooded. The plumber can't come until next week. I can't stay here, it's dangerous. Can I come stay with you?" He sighed, clearly irritated. "Clara, tonight's terrible timing. Lisa and I have clients over for dinner. And honestly, the guest room is full of storage right now. Maybe try Mom and Dad." So I did. "Sweetheart," my mother said, "we'd love to help, but we're hosting bridge club tomorrow, and your father's back is acting up. You really should look into a hotel. Don't you have insurance for things like this?" Insurance, bridge club, clients, excuses stacked on excuses, flimsy shields against the truth. I wasn't a priority. I never had been. I hung up, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. I sat on the stairs, staring at the water creeping across the floor, and realized I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Something broke inside me that day. Not the kind of break that shatters, but the kind that sets you free. I thought about every moment in my life when I had begged for scraps of attention from them. The time they left my high school graduation early for Troy's baseball game. The way my college scholarship was dismissed as my choice. My expense while Troy's tuition was fully paid. The wedding where my mother criticized my dress and my brother arrived late. All the years of trying to matter to people who couldn't bother to see me. And now, in the darkest chapter of my life, they had chosen again and again to leave me standing alone. I looked around the flooded house, the broken promises dripping from every wall, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Maybe this was what clarity looked like. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet knowing. I would never beg them again. The days that followed were brutal. I moved from room to room, salvaging what I could, piling soaked belongings by the curb. Neighbors offered sympathy. One brought me soup. Another lent me a space heater. Strangers showed me more kindness in a week than my own blood had in a lifetime. At night, I sat in Evan's old flannel, writing letters to him in a journal. I told him about the small mercies, the neighbor's casserole, the way the plumber finally showed up and shook his head at the mess, The kindness of Gloria at the airport. I told him I was trying to be strong, that I was learning how to live in a world without him. And I told him about my decision. Evan, I wrote, I'm done chasing love that isn't there. I spent 34 years begging my family to notice me, care. But you taught me something better, that love is steady, that it shows up. They never did. And now I'm finished waiting. This is my revenge, if you can call it that. Not anger. Not shouting. Just silence. Just distance. Just freedom. The storm outside raged for days, but inside I began to feel lighter. I blocked the family group chat. I stopped returning calls. When my mother left a voicemail about miscommunication and hurt feelings, I deleted it without listening to the end. For once, I didn't feel guilty. Felt powerful. Because revenge doesn't always mean striking back. Sometimes it means walking away. Sometimes it means finally refusing to let people keep wounding you. And that's what I did. I buried my husband alone. I returned home to disaster alone. And I rebuilt alone. But in that solitude, I discovered something my family could never give me. Strength. I don't know what the future holds. The house still needs repairs, my bank account is a mess. And my grief is a shadow that follows me everywhere. But I know this much. I will never again knock on a door that has always been closed. My story isn't about the family I lost. It's about the one love I was lucky enough to have, and the courage he left me with. And though I walk forward without him, I carry his steadiness in my bones. That is my revenge. That is my freedom.